A patient I'll never forget walked into my office on a Tuesday morning. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Doc, I don't feel like a man anymore." That hit me. Not because it was awry here, that sentence more than you'd think, but because of the quiet desperation in his voice. Charles wasn't talking about pride or ego. He was talking about something deeper: connection, vitality, life itself slipping through his fingers. His story started, like so many, with something he thought was minor. He noticed his erections weren't quite what they used to: be softer, less frequent, taking longer. Then came the urgency to urinate, getting up at night more than once, and the slow disappearance of interest in intimacy altogether. And the worst part, he thought it was just getting old. Let me be clear with you. A siren telling you something far more serious is going on inside your body. Your penis is one of the first places blood flow problems show up. Why? Because it relies on tiny blood vessels, far smaller than those feeding your heart or brain. If those vessels are clogging, stiffening, or narrowing, you'll know it down there long before you feel chest pain. I've seen this connection time and again. Men come in complaining of erectile dysfunction. We check their vascular system, and guess what? Early heart disease, hidden diabetes, silent hypertension. The penis tells the truth when the rest of the body is still trying to lie. One of the biggest myths I hear from men is this idea that it's just testosterone. And yes, testosterone plays a role, but it's not the whole story. Your arteries, your nerves, your mental health, your lifestyle, all feed into this. You see, an erection is not just a physical reaction. It's a complex dance between your brain, your hormones, your heart, and your vessels. I've had patients on testosterone therapy who saw no improvement at all because the issue wasn't hormonal. It was vascular. It was neurological. It was emotional. I've had patients come in with normal T levels but still struggling in the bedroom, and I tell them all the same thing: your penis is not betraying you. It's trying to warn you. When I examine men over 60, I always ask about morning erections. Not because I'm nosy, but because it tells me about blood flow integrity. If those morning erections are gone, it's often the first domino in a much larger chain. That's the point when the body is whispering. If we wait until chest pain or mini-strokes, it's shouting. And you don't want to wait for the shouting. Charles didn't. After that first visit, we ran a full panel. He had early signs of atherosclerosis plaque building up in his arteries, and his blood pressure was flirting with dangerous territory. But his penis told the truth. That's why I say this again and again. With all the compassion in my heart, death starts in the penis. If you ignore these signs, who feels less than? You're not alone. You're not broken. You're not weak. I've had patients walk in with shame and walk out with a plan. That shift can happen in a single hour. But only if you're brave enough to talk about it, to ask questions, to demand more from your doctor and from yourself. Because this isn't just about performance. It's about longevity. It's about protecting your heart, your brain, your kidneys, your future. I had another man. He hasn't been himself lately, she said. When I asked him what had changed, he mumbled something about not feeling right down there. That vague discomfort turned out to be the first sign of peripheral artery disease. He was days away from a stroke and had no idea. And yes, we also found signs of prostate enlargement, but that was just one piece of the puzzle. The real danger was happening silently in his arteries. If we hadn't looked, if we hadn't taken his sexual symptoms seriously, we might have missed it entirely. That's why I treat every man's story with respect, because tucked inside those quiet complaints is often the map to saving his life. I've been doing this work for over 4 decades, and I've seen the same patterns again and again. The men who ignore their sexual health often end up facing much bigger battles later on. Kidney failure, heart attacks. What happens in your groin doesn't stay there. It echoes across your body. That's why when I say death starts in the penis, I'm not being dramatic. I'm being clinical. I'm being honest. And I'm trying to wake you up. Because I care. Because I've seen the consequences. Because I've held the hands of too many men who told me, I wish I'd come in sooner. This little molecule helps your blood vessels relax and widen, allowing for better flow. It's absolutely vital for erections. But after 60, your body doesn't make it as efficiently. That's why you might notice slower response times, weaker firmness, or difficulty maintaining an erection. Dark leafy greens, beats, physical activity. Even a daily walk can help. I've seen men reverse mild ed just by cleaning up their diet and moving more. No pills, no injections, just consistent care. Told it's just part of aging, that there's nothing to be done. Please hear me. That is defeatist nonsense. Aging is real, yes, but decline is not inevitable. There's a world of difference between getting older and giving up. I've treated 80-year-old men with better erections than guys in their 40s because they took care of their cardiovascular health, their sleep, their stress, their check engine light, and they didn't ignore it. Now, maybe you're hearing all this and thinking, well, Doc, it's already too late for me. That's the most dangerous lie of all. It is never too late to reclaim your health. I've watched men bounce back from near disaster because they chose to act. I've seen intimacy restored in marriages that had gone cold for years. I've watched confidence return to faces that once carried only shame. It begins with honesty. With one appointment, one test, one conversation, the body is resilient, and so are you. You're not broken. You're not done. You're just ready for a new chapter. And if no one else has told you this today, let me be the first. You're still a man. A man with power, with value, with potential. And I promise you, if you listen to your body, if you respond with care and courage, then even now, even after 60, you can take back control. You can protect your life. You can reconnect with your partner. You can reclaim your confidence. Because death doesn't have to start in your penis. Not if you pay attention, not if you act, and not if you believe, as I do, that the best years of your life can still be ahead. I remember one man, Larry, 66 years old, who came to see me after a long stretch of ignoring his symptoms. His wife had finally convinced him to come in. What started as mild erectile dysfunction had become something far more complicated. When I looked at his chart and ran some tests, it painted a clear picture. Early type 2 diabetes, hypertension, and signs of nerve damage. And it all began with something he had brushed off for years: less firmness, fewer spontaneous erections. These symptoms were never just about sex. They were his body trying to speak, trying to ask for help. This is what I want you to understand. The penis is one of the most sensitive instruments in the male body. It doesn't just respond to arousal, it responds to stress, sleep, blood sugar, circulation, even emotional distance. It's like a messenger, and when it goes quiet, you should listen closely. I've had men who were marathon runners come in shocked that their function was declining. But I'm in shape, they'd say, and they were physically, but mentally, stressed to the breaking point. Emotionally, it reflects everything else going on inside you. Let's talk about testosterone again, because it keeps coming up. And yes, testosterone is important, but it's not magic. I always start with the basics. Are you sleeping well? Are you carrying excess weight around your midsection? Are you moving daily? Are you managing your stress? Because even if we give you testosterone, if you're not addressing those root issues, it's like throwing water on a grease fire. Get the shot, feel great for a few weeks, then crash even harder, because the underlying system is still broken. And let's be honest, part of the reason men don't talk about this stuff is because we were taught not to. But I'll tell you right now, the bravest men I've ever met are the ones who sit down across from me and say, something's not right. That's courage. That's leadership. I remember one veteran, David, 74 years old, who had been dealing with Ed for almost a decade. His wife had been understanding, but the distance between them had grown. He thought it was just age, but his blood pressure was uncontrolled, and his cholesterol was sky high. We started working on that, slowly, steadily, and within 3 months, things started to change. Not just in the bedroom, but in the kitchen, on the walks they started taking together, in the laughter that returned to their evenings. That's what we're talking about. Not just function, but connection. Not just blood flow, but life flow. Now, here's something a lot of guys don't know. Your pelvic floor matters more than you think. The muscles down there, the ones that support your bladder, your prostate, your penis, they weaken over time, especially if you sit a lot or don't. Move your hips. And when those muscles weaken, it impacts your ability to get and keep an erection. I've had men in their 60s who started doing simple pelvic floor exercises. Yes, Kegels from Anand saw big improvements. No pills, no surgeries, just awareness, intention, and effort. You just have to meet it halfway, and if you're dealing with prostate, issues like so many men after 60 are don't, ignore that either. A swollen prostate can press on your urethra, making urination harder, less complete, and less frequent, but it also affects your sexual health. I've seen men with borderline prostate enlargement who had no idea it was contributing to their ED. Once we got that treated through meds, diet, even supplements in some cases, they saw major improvements. It's all connected. Helpful is silence. What's not helpful is pretending everything's fine. One man I saw, late 60s, had gone 5 years without being intimate with his wife. Not because he didn't love her, but because he was ashamed. He told me later, "Doc, I didn't just get my function back, I got my dignity back." That stuck with me, because that's what's really at stake here. Not just anatomy, but identity. I know it's not easy to face this. I know it can feel like a betrayal of your manhood. But please, hear me. Real manhood is about facing what's hard. And the good news is, you don't have to face it alone. I've been walking beside men like you for 40 years. I've seen every story, every fear, every frustration. And I've seen what happens when we confront it together. Healing, confidence, joy. Yes, even in your 70s and 80s. So if you've noticed the signs: decreased drive, softer erections, more trips to the bathroom at night, don't brush it off. Don't wait until it gets worse, because it can get worse. Their energy, their lives in weeks. It starts with honesty. Trust it. Trust yourself. You're not broken, you're just ready for change. I had this gentleman, his name was Jorge, 70 years old, come in with what he called minor issues. He said it almost jokingly, trying to brush it off like it was nothing. But as we talked, it became clear his energy was gone. He was urinating 10 times a night, and his erections had faded to nothing over the past few years. "Doc," he said, "I just feel ... hollow." That word stuck with me, hollow, because it wasn't just about losing erections, of himself. And believe me, I've heard variations of that word from hundreds of men over the years. It's the quiet ache that no one talks about. The slow unraveling of masculinity that creeps in when your body starts sending signals you don't want. To hear now, I want you to understand why this happens. As we age, the blood vessels in our penis, those tiny, delicate capillaries, become less responsive. The inner lining of those vessels, called the endothelium, starts to stiffen. When that happens, blood doesn't flow as freely. The result: weaker erections, slower arousal, and less overall sensitivity. But here's the thing. That same stiffening is happening in your coronary arteries, your brain, your kidneys. So when the penis speaks up, we need to listen, not panic, but investigate, because it's an early alarm bell. And if we hear it, in time, we can make changes that protect the rest of the system. I've had men come in worried that they're losing their minds, forgetting things, misplacing keys, struggling to focus. And yes, sometimes it's early cognitive decline. But other times, it's sleep apnea, undiagnosed and untreated. Cutting off oxygen at night and affecting memory, mood, and yes, erections. Or it's uncontrolled blood sugar slowly damaging nerves, or chronic inflammation from poor diet and gut health. That's why we can't isolate the penis from the rest of the body. It's not a separate system. It's a window into what's happening inside, often before anything shows up in blood work or scans. Let's also talk about medications. So many men over 60 are on drugs for blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, sometimes 5 or 6 prescriptions at once. And some of those medications, especially the older ones, wreak havoc on sexual function. I can't tell you how many times I've looked at a patient's chart and realized their ED started right after starting a certain drug, but no one told them that. No one warned them, so they assumed it was just them. "I'm just getting older," they say. No, not age, it's chemistry. And we can often fix it by switching medications, adjusting doses, or supporting the body in other ways. There was one man, Thomas, 64, who came in furious, not at me, but at what he'd been through. Everything, pills, supplements, even online male enhancement scams. Nothing worked, and no one had taken the time to explain what was actually going on in his body. When we sat down and looked at everything, his sleep, his stress, his blood pressure meds, his alcohol intake, it was clear. He didn't need another pill, he needed a roadmap. We built that plan together. Within 2 months, he was sleeping better, had more energy, and his erections started returning. Not because of magic, because of strategy. That's what I do. I don't sell miracle cures. I help men understand what their body is trying to sand, how to respond with wisdom. You deserve that kind of care. You deserve more than 5-minute appointments and quick prescriptions, because this part of your life matters. I can't tell you how many marriages I've seen teeter on the edge because of unspoken tension around sex, not because men don't love their wives, but because they feel ashamed or frustrated or broken, and so they shut down. But when you fix what's underneath, when you bring blood flow back, when you restore confidence, it doesn't just help your penis. It helps your partnership. It brings laughter back into the room. Touch, conversation. I've seen it happen with couples who had all but given up, and it all started with one man choosing to speak up and get help. Let's not forget the emotional side of this either. Depression in older men is one of the most underdiagnosed issues I see. And you know what one of the first symptoms is? Loss of libido, not wanting sex, not caring. If that's you, it's not weakness, it's not failure. It might be depression, and it's treatable. You're not supposed to just fade into the background as you age. You're allowed to want pleasure, to want connection, to want joy. That desire doesn't retire when you turn 60. It just needs different support. I once had a widower, 69 years old, come in and tell me, I didn't think I'd ever need this part of me again. He'd lost his wife years ago, shut down emotionally, and figured that chapter was over. But life surprised him. He met someone new, and suddenly that old spark came back. Only now, his body wasn't cooperating. We worked together gently, patiently, and within 6 months, he was back in the game. He cried in my office. Not because of the sex, but because he felt alive again. That's the power of not giving up. And listen, not every solution is complicated. Sometimes it's hydration. Yes, I'm serious. Dehydration affects circulation. Sometimes it's a magnesium deficiency, or a lack of zinc, or poor gut health affecting hormone absorption. The body is a system, and if one part is sluggish, the whole thing feels off. That's why I always take a full spectrum view. Not just your penis, your heart, your sleep, your gut, your brain, your habits, your stress, your joy, all of it. So if you're hearing this and thinking, that sounds like me, I want you to take a breath, and I want you to know there's hope. There are answers. And you don't have to keep carrying this alone. I've sat with thousands of men just like you, smart, strong, capable men who just needed someone to say, hey, let's figure this out together. That's what I'm here for. That's what good medicine is for. Not to shame you, to patch you up and send you off, but to walk with you, to see the whole picture, and to restore what's been fading. Not just physically, but in your spirit, you're still here. And that means there's still time. I remember sitting across from a man named Dennis Keeve. He was 71, former firefighter, broad-shouldered, still carried himself like someone ready to run into a burning building. But when he talked about what was going on, his voice was barely above. A whisper, Doc, he said. I can't get it up anymore, and I don't know what that means about me. You could see it in his eyes. He wasn't just talking about function. He was talking about identity, about value, about feeling like he was disappearing. And that's what I see over and over. When the penis stops working, it shakes something inside, and if no one helps you make sense of it, it can erode your confidence from the inside out. Now here's the truth. Most men don't get told. This change doesn't happen overnight. It starts subtly. Maybe you don't wake up with morning wood as often. Maybe you start to avoid intimacy because you're not sure how things will go. Then you find yourself skipping foreplay, making excuses, withdrawing emotionally. And before you know it, it's been months or years since you felt that part of yourself, and because it crept in so gradually, it's easy to blame it on aging. Easy to think, well, this is just how it is now. But no, that's not the full story. One of the things I always say is this: your body is always talking to you. Whether it's fatigue, weaker erections, difficulty climaxing, or changes in urination. None of these are random. They are messages, signals, and when you learn how to read them, you can respond with action instead of fear. I had a man once, mid-60s, who told me, I just don't feel connected to my body anymore. We dug into it. Turns out, his testosterone was low, but he also had chronic inflammation from a diet full of processed foods, barely drank water, and hadn't broken a sweat in 10 years. We made simple changes: better sleep, gentle movement, clean eating. 3 months later, he was walking taller, smiling more. His wife called me to say, "Thank you for giving me my husband back." That's what this is about. It's not about chasing your 20s again, it's about feeling whole again. And the penis is part of that. Not the only part, but an important one. It's not vain to want to feel desire or to experience pleasure. It's human. And when men suppress that, ignore it, bury it under shame or false pride, it doesn't just go away. It festers. It eats away at self-worth. I've seen it turn into depression, resentment, isolation. But I've also seen the opposite men who faced the truth, took control, and found joy again. Yes, joy. In their bodies, in their relationships, in themselves. Let's talk about fear for a moment. It's fear that stops most men from getting help. Fear that they'll be told it's over. Fear that they're too far gone. Fear that they'll be embarrassed, judged, dismissed. But I'll tell you something, the men who sit in my office are some of the bravest I've ever known. They show up even though they're scared. They ask the hard questions. They look at the parts of themselves they'd rather avoid. And that's where healing begins. That's where strength is rebuilt, not in pretending everything's okay, but in confronting what isn't. And I don't want you to think that you have to figure this out on your own. There's so much noise out there, ads for pills, devices, supplements, magic solutions, and I get it. When you're desperate, anything sounds worth trying. But most of those things are band-aids. What you need is a comprehensive approach, one that looks at your hormones, yes, but also your heart, your liver, your nerves, your sleep, your emotional well-being. That's what real healing looks like. It's not a single pill. It's a process, and I promise you, I've seen it work. There was a man named Elijah 69, former high school coach who'd been on a downward spiral for years. ED had taken a toll on his marriage. He'd stopped talking to his wife, stopped hugging her, stopped sitting next to her on the couch. He said, "I just didn't feel like I deserved to be close to her anymore." But when we started working together, and he understood that his issues weren't a personal failure, but a medical one, when he started to take small steps, things began to change. He started walking every morning, started journaling, started cutting back on sugar. Within weeks, he told me, "Doc, I touched my wife's hand for the first time in months, and she didn't pull away." That moment meant more to him than any medication ever could. That's why I say this work is sacred. Because it's not just about restoring function, it's about restoring connection, intimacy, dignity. And yes, sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it takes time, but every step you take is worth it. You deserve to feel good in your body. You deserve to feel strong, connected, desired, not because you're chasing youth, but because you're embracing life fully, honestly, with courage. And I'll say this again for the man who needs to hear it. You are not broken. You are not less. You are not too late. What you are is in transition, and transitions are where growth lives. I've had men in their 80s tell me they feel better than they did in their 50s because they finally stopped ignoring what their body was trying to say. They stopped hiding, and they started healing. So if something feels off, don't ignore it. Don't minimize it. Don't push it down and hope it disappears. It won't, but neither will your strength. Neither will your power. You still have that in you. Even if it's buried under shame or silence, it's there. I see it every day. In men just like you who chose to speak, to learn, to act. That's the path forward, and you can take that first step today. One of the most powerful conversations I've ever had was with a man named Richard. He sat down across from me and said, "I don't even know who I am anymore." He told me he hadn't had an erection in over 5 years, that he stopped trying, that he avoided mirrors, that he felt like a ghost in his own life, and I told him what I'm telling you right now. Yes, there is dot. You see, when you've lived a certain way for a long time, suppressing needs, ignoring symptoms, chalking everything up to a JIT, becomes easy to believe that decline is the natural course. But aging doesn't mean disappearing, and it certainly doesn't mean you stop deserving pleasure, touch, confidence, and joy. I've looked into the eyes of hundreds of men who thought they were too far gone, and I've watched them come back to life step by step when they finally started listening to their bodies instead of punishing them. The penis is where so many of those whispers begin. Weaker erections, delayed arousal, changes in sensation. It's all connected to what's happening inside you. Blood pressure, blood sugar, circulation, sleep patterns, mental health. If your penis isn't functioning, your body is trying to say something. And if you ignore it, you're not just risking your sex life, you're risking your heart, your brain, your entire future. This isn't just about pleasure, it's about survival. It's about quality of life. It's about choosing to stay engaged with your own story, rather than writing yourself out of it. I've had patients with early Parkinson's who first came in because of erectile changes. I've caught thyroid issues, autoimmune disorders. You are not weak for bringing it up. You are wise and brave and smart. You break the silence that's trapped so many men in shame for generations. And I'll say this, this journey isn't always linear. There will be setbacks. There will be moments where things don't improve as fast as you hoped. But don't let those moments define your effort. I had one man, Albert, who started on a new regimen, clean diet, weight loss, resistance training, and after 3 weeks, he told me, "Doc, I feel worse." But he stuck with it. 8 weeks in, he called me with tears in his voice. "It's working," he said. "I feel like myself again." Sometimes your body needs time to adjust, to undo years of neglect, to find rhythm again. Give it that. Anxiety, especially performance anxiety, is one of the biggest silent killers of intimacy I see in men. Sometimes we use therapy, but the key is, don't let fear build a wall between you and the life you want. It doesn't have to be perfect to be beautiful. Connection doesn't require perfection, it requires presence. Richard, the widower I mentioned, started small. He didn't jump into a new relationship or try to recreate his youth. He focused on getting better sleep, on going for walks, on learning how to cook for himself again. He started writing in a journal. He began to feel things against sadness, yes, but also hope. And with time, his body started responding. Not just sexually, but energetically. He had spark again, a twinkle in his eye. That's what this is about. Not just restoring function, but reviving your spark. I know this isn't easy to talk about. I know some of you are listening and thinking, "He's not talking about me. I'm too far gone." Men who hadn't been intimate in 20 years find a path forward. The human body is remarkably resilient, and the male spirit, when supported and believed in, is unstoppable. You just need someone in your corner, someone to say, "I see you, I hear you, I'm not judging. Let's do this together." So here's what I want you to take from this. Your penis is not a source of shame, it's a signal. And if you listen to it, if you follow that signal inward, you'll uncover the real issues that need healing. Maybe it's your diet. Maybe it's your diet. It's your sleep. Maybe it's emotional wounds you've carried too long. Maybe it's physical damage that can be reversed with the right help. Whatever it is, there's a road ahead, and you are not alone on it. You're still here, which means your body hasn't given up, which means neither should you.